explaining the Reanimation Jutsu, or as many of you may have heard of it, Edo Tensei by Swagkage. Edo Tensei was, and is still, for all intents and purposes, one of the most powerful jutsu ever really conceived in Naruto. I wouldn't say necessarily all of fiction. I do think that's a little bit of a reach, because there are definitely interesting things that I would say beat it in fiction. But in the Naruto setting, this is probably one of the most potent and effective jutsu of all time. I wouldn't even... I don't even know where to begin countering that point. And just there's some interesting things that going into Boruto just are still kind of like just not quite sitting well with me, because we have like Kabuto just sitting around. Yes, he was changed by the Izanami. Yes, absolutely. We have Kabuto just sitting around who used Edo Tensei to such a degree. He in himself effectively staffed an entire like war battalion of like Kage level shinobi, and he's just sitting around with a bunch of Sharingan. Yeah, Kabuto has me a little worried. But alas, with my experience in some of the CCG kind of things, and as a fan of Naruto, I wanted to see if there was something I maybe missed in there in regards to the Edo Tensei, or if there's very valid reasons for a weakness to the jutsu. Let's get into it. If you haven't seen Swagkage, you should definitely check him out, though.
I'm going to be looking at what is, without a doubt, the most complicated ninjutsu in the entire Naruto universe. Kuchiyose Edo Tensei, or Summoning Impure World Reincarnation, is an S-class forbidden technique created by Tobirama Senju and is a derivative of the summoning technique. The idea behind the jutsu is very simple. Its purpose is essentially to bring a dead person back to life. In execution, though, it's a lot more complicated than that. As the name implies, and as I mentioned earlier, this technique is derived from the summoning jutsu, which means that the person being brought back to life has to be summoned to the world of the living. Now, I'll probably talk more about the details of the summoning technique in another video, but one of the key traits of the summoning technique that makes using it to bring someone back from the dead so complicated is the fact that generally, when a person or animal is summoned, they have to have a contract with their summoner. Obviously, you can't exactly discuss making one of these contracts with somebody who isn't alive, but luckily there's a workaround for that. In place of a summoning contract, a user of this technique needs a sample of the DNA of the person they wish to summon. The amount of DNA needed to revive a person isn't substantial at all and can be anything as small as a sample of that person's blood. The biggest issue...
And this is actually why the jutsu is so dangerous, because I think there's certain niche situations where potentially someone couldn't get Edo Tensei resurrected. I think there's like a situation or two where that couldn't be the case. But generally, as long as you have access to the essence of someone, as I will call it, right? Be that bone, blood, skin, cells, hair, anything. As long as you have something of that person, you will be able to enact the Edo Tensei. And that is a terrifying thought. And this is why Kabuto looked for people like Shisui, looked for their DNA, looked for in Danzo, right? Shisui's eye. But Danzo ended up crushing it and thus rendering it unusable. And apparently to some degree in regard to Shisui as well. It's such a terrifying jutsu because of how easy it is to actually set up. Yes, there is technically prep time involved. So if you wanted to, say, resurrect Jiraiya, which Kabuto couldn't because his body fell far below, far below, it was the ocean at that point. It was the ocean, right? Yeah, it fell far below the ocean at that point and, was under too great a pressure for things to reach. So, yeah, and even then, currents could have swept it away. Point is, no essence of Jiraiya could have been found. And thus, Jiraiya could not have been resurrected. Shisui's body could not have been found. She could not have been resurrected. Which is also interesting because you have the decay of certain things, like just organic material rots, organic material breaks down. So realistically, it might be hard to find someone from, say, the Warring States era with Madara and Hashirama, right? To find, remains that may not have been preserved correctly, and they could have just rotted and or broken down to a point that they're unusable. So technically, it's a theoretical soft limit, but say if someone was preserved, or maybe they were cremated maybe into a state where it's technically still their essence, but it doesn't necessarily break down further, right? That's where you start getting to interesting territory. Or Hashirama cells, which just live on through other people, right? Like Danzo's arm alone could have had enough Hashirama cells to try and resurrect somebody, as well as the Edo Tensei's uncanny ability to kind of just make plot holes. And why? Well, the reason why I kind of say that is that it resurrects people in their prime, quote unquote, state, which I'm sure Swagkage will get into. So when Nagato was resurrected, he was resurrected with his Rinnegan. Okay. But I guess technically we should kind of give him credit. Maybe the DNA had fused enough from, maybe the DNA from Madara's Rinnegan fused enough with Nagato's DNA to kind of form, it's Nagato's identity at that point. And then we get to Deus Ex Madara, who is resurrected in prime armored form, right? And is able to go from EMS straight to Rinnegan when he didn't even awaken his Rinnegan until late in his life. And I guess you could maybe say it was meddling from Kabuto putting Hashirama's cells in his face on him. I mean, you could, I guess, theoretically say that. But it just opens up weird... maybe that's just more Madara at that point, Deus Ex Madara, than Edo Tensei at that point. But there's definitely complications and weird plot interactions that happen because of Edo Tensei reviving someone in their quote-unquote prime.
A user of the technique will often run into is that a living sacrifice must be made in order to use it. Without a body to roam around in, the summoned soul can't really do much, so as Kabuto said, a living sacrifice is needed so that their body can be used as a vessel for the dead person being summoned. So once a person has gathered everything they need for the Impure World Reincarnation, the technique's ritual can begin. The ritual is very similar to rituals seen in standard summoning.
Technically, blood shouldn't work, because as far as I'm aware, blood itself actually doesn't have DNA in it, right? Interesting conversations I get to at 3 a.m. because, family member is in forensics, right? Just reasoning behind it. I don't think blood actually has DNA in it. I know like skin cells and stuff would, but I mean that also, if blood is the only thing that is required, that would also give credence to it just being the quote unquote essence of the person. I guess white blood cells would have that DNA, yeah. Yeah, I know, I guess you're right on that one. I guess scratch that. But yeah, no, there's a lot of interesting interactions that come up because of that. And in regards to how complete does the DNA need to be, right? Enough? Are you able to logic that this came from this person? If so, then yes.
Techniques, as it involves a scroll and the smearing of blood or DNA of some sort on that scroll. Once the summoner activates this scroll, the remains of the person used to summon them spread out in the form of a seal around the person being sacrificed, and this is where the magic happens.
I know there was an explanation on that. You brought up, how does Shisui's eye not count as DNA? I know that has come up before, and I thought there was an answer to that, but I don't remember the answer to that. So in the comments, if you know what the answer to that is, I'm open to citation on that. Because I know for a fact there was a panel in which Kabuto discussed why he couldn't resurrect Shisui.
Bunch of dust and ash will cling to the sacrifice's body, at which point they are effectively turned into the person being summoned. Their personality, chakra, appearance, and anything else of the sort are all replaced by the revived persons, at which point the ritual is complete. From this point forward, the summoner has complete control over the person they revived. Now, initially, when Tobirama first created the technique, reanimated Shinobi ended up being much weaker than they were when they were alive. Additionally, there was a cap on how many ninja Tobirama could control at any given time, and both of these flaws together significantly limited the potential of the technique. When Orochimaru mastered the technique, he did his best to make the flaws less significant, but it wasn't until Kabuto mastered the Edo Tensei that both flaws were eliminated completely. There's no limit to how many reanimated people Kabuto can control at any given time, and Kabuto's reanimated shinobi are much more powerful than Tobirama's were. Granted,
I would say that Kabuto probably perfected it in the sense that the Edo Tensei reanimated became autonomous units. Not to say that Tobirama's form didn't do that. Not to say that Orochimaru's form didn't do that to some degree, but I feel like they still had to kind of channel into that. And Orochimaru still had even more setup time having to put the tags into Hashirama and Tobirama to be able to control them effectively, right? So Kabuto being able to potentially maybe even self-contain that system, and, it could be that Kabuto goes after certain specific stronger shinobi, not just people, right? But shinobi, that might also have a bearing because they have a natural physical disposition in a positive manner that your average person wouldn't. Maybe that helps with it as well. I mean, it could very well be.
Kabuto's reanimations are still slightly weaker than their living counterparts, but the issue is nowhere near as bad as it used to be. One drawback that no user of the technique has been able to get rid of is the fact that to reanimate a person, their soul has to be resting inside of the Pure Land, which is essentially the Naruto afterlife. Now, generally, everybody's soul goes there after they die, but there are some rare exceptions where this isn't the case. For example, Kabuto was not able to summon the first 4 Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village because each of their souls had been trapped inside of the belly of the Grim Reaper. deeper. Now, that said, the technique's flaws are offset by its many advantages. A user of the technique has control over every reanimated person they summon. The degree of control a summoner has over their reanimated shinobi is completely up to them as well. A reanimation...
Right. Now I remember. If a person isn't being suppressed, they can simply choose to just not, right? Like, wasn't it the filler arc where we had Kabuto resurrecting... Was it the third Kazekage? Right? And then he's just like, do not do, like, he's just like, wow, you're being rude, just kind of left, right? Or how Chio in the Fourth Ninja War kind of came to terms with, the reality and it wasn't Chio. Who was it? It was Sasori, right? Sasori came to be at peace seeing Scorpion being used by Konkuro, and he just kind of transcended. He had no regrets, so he just effectively left and moved on. That kind of thing, right? I mean, that you can do that, I guess, if your will is strong enough or if enough pieces are in play. But if your will is being suppressed, I mean, at that point, the caster is having to either put you on autopilot or having to channel directly into you as an Edo Tensei summon in order to act in that specific manner.
Free will and personality can both be left intact, effectively allowing them to do whatever they want with no restrictions. Both the free will and personality of the reanimation can be completely eradicated, giving the summoner complete control over all of their actions. They can leave a person's personality intact but take away their free will, effectively putting them in a state where they are programmed to do as the summoner wishes but still have the same thoughts and feelings as they did while they were alive, and so on and so forth. Furthermore, reanimated shinobi will have access to every single ability they had when they were alive, even if those abilities are not originally theirs. For example, Nagato was revived with his Rinnegan intact, despite the fact that those Rinnegan belonged to Madara. What's even more surprising about that is that Kabuto revived Madara and Nagato at the same time, and both of them had access to their Rinnegan abilities. On top of...
It's that weird picking and choosing when their prime is or in what state to resurrect them in that kind of throws it off for me. It's not exactly a science. It's more of a, hey, this kind of happened now, but why? Don't worry about it. Now you got two Rinnegan on the battlefield.
Of that, reanimations have infinite chakra and can regenerate from...
Right, actually, furthermore on that, how the reanimated Rinnegan are allegedly less powerful than the actual Rinnegan, as showcased by Madara, right? And when he was, I think it was Madatabi, the Two Tails, was saying that it's when he's revived, it'll be a stronger Rinnegan, right? Where Nagato's wasn't really nerfed in any capacity. Well, it's why I continue to say Madara is a plot point rather than a character. He is Deus Ex Madara. Not that I hate him. It's just one of those things that I've definitely sat there and scratched my head and gotten a headache trying to think how this man makes sense.
From any and all injuries. The only way to fully defeat a reanimated person is to seal them away or force the person who summoned them to release the reanimation jutsu. So with this technique, what you have access to is a potentially endless army of the most powerful shinobi in all of history, who have been turned into immortal zombies with infinite chakra. They can even be left on autopilot so you don't have to do any work yourself. It goes without saying, but this technique is really hacks OP. Quite possibly the most broken ability in the entire Naruto universe. That said, it does have two crippling flaws. The first is that reanimations can still be affected by genjutsu. Now, at face value, this isn't too terrible, but with certain super powerful genjutsu, it's possible to turn a reanimated person against their summoner. For example, Itachi Uchiha.
Yeah, I mean, if we're discussing the Kodomatsukami, I mean, that starts getting into, like, hacks Uchiha territory, to be fair. That's not necessarily your average encounter, because Kodomatsukami was actually just like nutty broken because it was an AoE.
Uchiha used the Eye of Shisui Uchiha to cast a genjutsu on himself with Kodomatsukami. This genjutsu forced Itachi to follow a single order, and that order was to protect the Hidden Leaf Village. This genjutsu...
But I mean, because what was it? The clam that the second Mizukage had, right? I mean, that could potentially put most... not only ninja, but most Edo Tensei under a genjutsu. Itachi and Sasuke, well, Itachi specifically because he's an Edo Tensei, Itachi and Madara, right, are, for all intents and purposes, immune to ocular genjutsu. They're just immune, right? The Sharingan has bonuses to resisting genjutsu from at least ocular genjutsu, right? And there's, as far as I'm aware, a lower form cannot affect a higher form, right? Well, I don't even think that's true, because that's come up a couple times, but Sasuke was able to put Itachi at the Uchiha hideout into genjutsu, But Itachi was also not trying to win on purpose. So that one might come into question. But, it's one of those things that you don't have a Mangekyo that's necessarily going to beat Madara on first resurrection, right? So you can't really reliably have somebody other than maybe Sasuke try to put him under Genjutsu, but you think Madara's going to fall for Genjutsu? Not really. However, they are affected by things like sound-based Genjutsu, like Toyuga's flute. That was interesting to know, actually.
To completely cut off Kabuto's control over Itachi and eventually led Itachi to fight Kabuto alongside his brother Sasuke. The two Uchiha brothers won the battle, and Itachi even ended up forcing Kabuto to release the Reanimation Jutsu. The technique's second crippling flaw is that if a summoned person knows the hand seals to Impure World Reincarnation, they can perform those hand seals to cut off their connection with their summoner. This gives them complete control over all of their actions and all of the bonuses of being a reanimated person. You know, being an immortal zombie with infinite chakra and all that. As Madara Uchiha said when he released the Reanimation Jutsu on himself, tell whoever the summoner is, he shouldn't use a forbidden technique so carelessly. But that's where I'm gonna wrap things up. I think I've touched on pretty much every base.
Madara definitely kind of came out of left field with that one when he was back against the wall. That felt a little Deus Ex Madara.
The Reanimation Jutsu, though if I left anything out, feel free to ask any questions in the comments below. Like always, if you have anything you want me to talk about in the future, then just leave it down in the comments below, and if I like it enough, I'll get to it in a future video. Thank you guys for watching to the end. Hope you guys have a fantastic day, and if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. Talk to you guys later, everybody. Swagkage out. Bye.
I wonder if Tobirama actually knew the implications of that, actually, because we saw Madara, do Edo Tensei Kai.
Also, right, before I end the video, huge thanks and huge shout out to Mr. HD. He made me my new YouTube banner, and I'm a huge fan of it. If you want to check him out on Twitter or YouTube, I'll put a link to his channel and his Twitter in the description. He's really cool. He was super nice. If you need any graphics design work, hit him up. He won't charge you a whole lot, and he's super pleasant to work with. Thanks, guys. Bye.
I'll have to look into his work, because I've been looking for a banner for a hot minute. But yeah, I wonder if Tobirama, because he created the technique, I wonder if he was, one, aware of this weakness, two, if he would have used it, because I think it was that he realized Hashirama, Hiruzen, and Minato were all there for a purpose, right? To make sure that, they fix this situation, right? But I wonder if theoretically he could have released himself from Orochimaru's Edo Tensei. I'd be very curious to know that. What are your thoughts on that, actually? What are your thoughts on Genjutsu affecting, specifically ocular Genjutsu from, say, the Sharingan, affecting other Sharingan users, technically of a higher level of Sharingan, say Mangekyo, EMS, Rinnegan, etc.? What are your thoughts on Edo Tensei? What are your thoughts on how broken it is in setting? Do you think that it still outclasses some jutsu in Boruto? And because I have the memes, the CCG did have a couple really good variants of Edo Tensei. This was kind of the big one. This was set 20 specifically, and it required a user of, like Sasuke or higher, water with a entrance cost of 4 or more, and you just targeted a ninja in your discard pile, so you're effectively monster reborning them. But the way you did this was that you move it into your team, right? So you're using this, say, instant speed, right? You're in that exchange of jutsu, right? And you're using this, and you're supposed to bring it into play, but then it's just removed, right? At the end of the term, it's removed from play. And then, except if you were using Orochimaru, you don't remove that ninja. Yeah, I thought there was an extra text about that. But yeah, don't remove it from play. So if you could use this with any generic water turn 4 or above, but if it was Orochimaru, you kept that ninja around. So this saw play for a hot minute, and for good reasons. There's also like older copies where you have Orochimaru specifically, you target one of your ninjas and then a ninja in your discard pile, and you effectively get rid of the one ninja you target and bring the other one into play in your team, right? The one that I used a lot, and this one was actually kind of sexy for a hot minute, was this one. This was set 27, so the set just before the game died, because it was set 28 that killed the game after that. And this was specifically a Orochimaru or a Kabuto that was a higher turn cost, so a 5 or more, right? So, right, makes sense logically from the game standpoint. And you target one ninja in the other team. So, obviously, teams of ninjas fight off against each other during the battle phase is how that worked. And you would target that ninja opposing the user, and you just straight up discard it, not give it damage, not injure it. You would just get rid of it, discard that target. And then if it is discarded, you would put in play one ninja card from any player's discard pile in the user's team in any position. So say your team is pretty support heavy, but not very like combat heavy, if that makes sense. Because there's two stats. There's the support, which is, this is unofficial. There's a support number, which is the support number is the right one. That's any ninja in the back, and then the front one we use the left number, the 5 here. So you could say theoretically, if you're say pretty support heavy, you can say, I'm gonna discard your first Hokage, but I'm grabbing your first Hokage, and now he's in the front of my team. I played a lot of Water, if you couldn't tell. Water actually was right up my alley. And then set 28, you got this weird one from set 28, which was from Storm 3, and that was specifically Kabuto Yakshi with an Inshasa 6 or more, which was relevant because there was a Kabuto in that set that broke the game, and that was specifically on brand for the Edo Tensei ninjas, which came back. This one was okay at best. It was fine. It was support for the Edo Tensei mist deck, right? Or some of the Tailed Beast support, right? But nah, it's okay. Edo Tensei in the game did have some pretty strong showings. Set 20, this one was pretty good as well. And then the one that I used for so long before the game died. I still have 3 copies of this. I think I might have 4. But alas, that is kind of my history on that. As I said, if you are interested in Naruto CCG content, I'm more than happy to oblige if people think that they would want to learn about it, learn how to play it. I just have to kind of find a sacrifice to be willing to lend a pair of hands, but I'm pretty sure I could find that locally at the give moment's notice. In any event, let me know what you guys think in the comments section. And yeah, see you in the next one.